everyone. Welcome to the Cantor. I'm Susan Dackerman, the John and Jill Freidenrich Director of the Cantor Arts Center, and I'm so happy to see so many people here tonight for the opening celebration of 4 shows. So we have opened this evening Shannon Ebner's Stray, A Graphic Tone, Kerry Tribe's 2013 film Critical Mass. We have reinstalled the Contemporary Collection with an exhibition called The Medium is the Message, that's here on the first floor. And finally, we have Josiah McElhaney's Island Universe. As you can imagine, launching 4 big shows like this is quite an ambitious project and involves a lot of thought, planning, and just hard work. And honestly, it wouldn't be possible without the exceptional staff here at the Cantor. So I want to thank them for everything that they do to make this possible, to make such a good night, to have this much energy and such a good feel. So thank you very much. I also want to thank those who have made these exhibitions possible by funding them. So I want to thank Mary Ellie and Rupert Johnson, the Halpern Exhibition Fund, the Robert Mondavi Fund, the Klumek Endowment Fund, the Elizabeth Swindles Holsey Exhibitions Fund, the Liz Krywick Gibbons Gallery Exhibition Fund, the Elizabeth K. Murray Fund for Photography, and the Contemporary Collectors Circle. Without people like them, this wouldn't be possible, so we are grateful. So tonight we have the pleasure of hearing from Josiah McElheny, the artist who's responsible for the incredibly thought-provoking and beautiful exhibition up on our second floor called Island Universe. Let me just tell you a little bit about Josiah. He is a New York-based artist, and he is known as someone who is as deeply invested in the history of ideas as he is in the making of objects and the processes of making. His practice comprises sculpture, film, performance, printmaking, bookmaking, and writing, so he does it all. And he is recognized for the rigorous conceptual approach to the work he makes, as well as to the fineness of its making. So tonight, we're going to talk about Island Universe, the exhibition that is featured upstairs. And I'm going to sit down now so that we can begin this talk. I'm going to move this down a little so you don't get as much reverb. So I want to start just by telling you a little bit about Island Universe. The project was launched for Josiah when he first saw the chandeliers at the Metropolitan Opera House. And I guess that was about 18 years ago now. And what fascinated him was how they embodied the current thinking about the formation of the universe. He saw in them a relationship to new galaxies and the emergence of new galaxies. And he knew that they were made in 1965, in the same year that the evidence was found, the physical evidence for the Big Bang theory. So he started thinking about what it would mean to make work that was related to the emergence or the origins of the universe. And Island Universe is related to theories that have emerged since the Big Bang theories in fact proposed by a distinguished Stanford professor, Andre Linda, about the multiverse. So that's what we are going to talk about this evening for all of you. So I have some questions that I'm going to ask Josiah, so I'm going to just turn around here and begin our conversation. So, to be transparent, Josiah and I have been thinking and talking about the depiction of the universe for quite some time. I am a Renaissance art historian, and I have worked on Albrecht Dürer's depictions of the heavens. You may not know this, but in 1515, Albrecht Dürer was the first artist to illustrate in print the heavenly spheres with the constellations placed correctly based on Ptolemy's star charts. And Josiah and I have talked about this, and we've talked about how artists work with scientists and what kind of relationships those are, but also about like what artists and scientists have in common. What kind of work do they do that is similar? So, Josiah, what do you think?
Well, I guess we've been, as you said, we've been talking about this for a while, and the thing that strikes me as being something that basically anybody could understand, and that at the same time could actually be important to state now, is that one thing that artists and scientists have in common is the idea of observation. So anybody could understand the idea that an artist, let's say if an artist draws something, how do they begin? Oftentimes it's through observation. And how does a scientist begin? Well, often to collect information, it's through observation. And this observation is the source and the generation of knowledge. It's the assembly of data, information, of insight, and then that can develop from that is new ideas, new understandings. And basically, so in that sense, I think that scientists and artists have something that at the core is some deeply shared. And one of the things that I made my collaboration with David Weinberg feel so, I guess, not easy is the wrong word because it was a very complicated project we've been involved in, but feel so sympathetic, I guess, is that I have been very moved by the way that so much of the grand ideas around cosmology come from a source that's very, very, let's say, simple in the sense of, for example, like measuring the color of the stars, for example. It's like, so to measure the way they shift color as they get farther away. That's something that, as an artist, I could understand. But yet, the implications of that idea turn out to be very, very big. So I like the idea that the observation that you make with the human body, with the human eye, even if it's assisted by a tool, could have great meaning.
Let's go back and talk about your collaboration a bit with David Weinberg. So when you began working on Island Universe, or you thought that there was a project there, you were an artist in residence at the Wexner Center at Ohio State University, and you began conversations with David Weinberg, who is a professor of astronomy and cosmography there. Can you tell us about your relationship, your working process, how you worked with such a hardcore scientist? And David Weinberg is here tonight, so.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say a big shout out to David and thank David for all the incredible collaboration. Well, I think that the first thing I did in terms of working with David was to not come completely unprepared. So basically, I think that was important. And basically, I came to him with a drawing, with a specific idea, and basically, but I also came with a proposal, and I came to him with some very, very basic idea of the problem of conceptualizing or visualizing or even understanding the origin of the universe, which is basically how to understand the idea that space itself can expand, which is a very difficult thing for the human brain to grasp. The idea that it's not something expanding into something, but it's actually space itself expanding. And so I think that was a relief to David to some extent, because basically this initial confusion that it's natural to anybody to have, I came to him and I said, I understand that we're starting with this problem already. And so then we had a long conversation in the very beginning in which, well, how do we get beyond that? And it was really David who found the breakthrough. At the end of a 3 or 4 hour conversation, when I initially met him, we were sort of staring at my drawing, my sort of very primitive drawing, and basically I'm pretty sure it was David who said at the end of that, towards the end of the conversation, he said, "Oh, but wait a minute, what if this is not a drawing of space, but a drawing of time?" And basically, then suddenly everything, the heavens opened. And basically, that breakthrough, that insight, that by simply shifting perspective on what we were talking about, from saying that, no, this two-dimensional pencil sketch was not a drawing of space and time, and it was not a drawing of space, but it was actually drawing essentially a diagram of time, essentially of like what happens over time. It's kind of a map of time, of the development of the history of the universe. Suddenly, we could make a map of that. We could make a map of time, and we could make that into 3 dimensions. And so that's, in effect, what all of the sculptural elements of Island Universe are maps of time. And they have some space in them too, which is a little confusing, but basically they're mostly maps of time. And
will you explain that a little, how they're maps of time? Because I have a sense of it, but the audience, I bet, doesn't. Starting with the sphere as, I'm going to do my physics talk now. The sphere as the last scattering surface, a moment in the beginning of cosmological time, and then the rods actually being representing the duration of time. Save me here, Josiah. And then
okay. I don't know if I can save you, because these questions are confusing, because time and space sort of become mixed up, in the sense that when you look at the night sky, you at some point you can use time and space interchangeably. So basically, it's a very difficult concept for the human brain to grasp, is that as you look farther and farther into the heavens, that basically you can say something is so far away, or you could say something is so old, and they're basically the same thing. Leaving that aside for the moment, basically in the sculptural installation upstairs, we allied that problem. We kind of leave that problem behind by essentially creating the idea that if you imagine that that you can make a series of sort of shells. Sort of, we talked about it initially as a slideshow, so that like if you are showing a map of time, you can't show every moment. You can show, that would take as long as the time
Right.
was.
Right.
So, you could say, like, you show a slideshow. So what shows upstairs is basically that each rod, each of the big rods is a measure of time, and basically every inch time doubles. And so basically, so you could say that we picked a certain number of rods that essentially limited by how many would fit on the sphere, and basically chose a length randomly, essentially, for each one. And basically, at the end of the rod, we're like, well, how long is that rod? Well, what's happening at that time in the universe? So if the rod is 3 feet long, we calculate, well, how old is the universe then? And what's happening at the universe then? And then if the rod is 3 feet 6 inches long, what's happening in the universe at that time? And basically, because as far as we know, the universe is homogeneous, it's the same everywhere, in the sense of like there's no center to the world. And that's one of the most exciting and radical and terrifying ideas about the modern cosmology, is that there is no center of the universe. We are definitely not at the center of the universe. And there is no hierarchy to the universe. So basically, any place is as good as any other place, which I have come to embrace as one of the most freeing of ideas.
So, are the constellations or the glass galaxies at the ends of the rods, do they represent the current time?
The rods that are longest represent the current
or
time.
The edges of the sculpture, is that
Yes.
now?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. But, and there's many, many buts in this whole process.
Always.
So the issue is, and I hesitate to try to explain this because there are of the people in the audience, I think I'm actually more nervous in this talk than I've ever been in any lecture I've ever done.
Will all the physicists, astronomers, and cosmographers just raise their hands? Yes.
I mean, usually I'm just talking about my own work, so I can't get anything wrong. But one of the questions that comes up in the late 60s about the Big Bang theory, about what essentially the idea that the universe expands and continues to expand, is that at one time it was a very hot and dense place, and why did this process of expansion begin? And it seems essentially, for many reasons, improbable. And basically, this was very disturbing to the physics and astronomy community, that this improbable event happened. And but it seemed more and more clear that it really did happen. We're really here. And
it seems lucky for us that it happened.
It does seem lucky. And basically, this question of luck actually is a really big question. Like, why is there anything here is actually a really important question, and one in which the scientific community is actually really asking. Why did we get so lucky? To basically, the conditions at the beginning of the early universe were so perfect to give us the conditions that make us. So one of the theories that appears in the early 80s, given to us by Professor Andre Linde, is the idea that basically one explanation that seems quite plausible for this is that that it's not happening once. That basically that we're part of actually a much larger universe, a multiverse, in which basically one way of describing it is that we're just like that our universe is just a local part of a much larger universe, or that we're in a bubble universe, or that there are many universes. And basically this seems to have become more and more and more accepted as the most plausible explanation of why we are here.
And so are the 5 elements upstairs 5 different propositions, 5 different possible models for the emergence of a universe?
Exactly. You said it perfect.
So as I said earlier, Josiah is known for the rigorous conceptualization of his work, but the work is also astoundingly well made and crafted, and you have just beautifully materialized your ideas in those objects. Can you tell us about their making?
Yeah, I've sometimes made a rough estimate that I think probably about 100 people worked on the project total. And basically, so it's a very complicated project in terms of many people helped me to do it. And there's many processes involved, but I'll just describe a couple that are interesting. Or they're all interesting, but maybe a few of the most interesting ones. So basically, two of the issues that were most challenging are that basically I wanted it to be accurate. Like basically I wanted this to actually reflect the science. I didn't want it to be an approximation of it in the sense of I wanted each element to really follow the science that even if it was speculative in the sense of like, even if we were proposing these universes that are purely possible universes, I wanted them to accurately follow the science that derives originally from observations of our own universe. So that meant that everything had to be follow these rules, essentially. So basically everything has this individual placement, individual size, individual proportion. And so basically, like the way to make a complicated thing is to repeat things. Well, this is as little as repetition as possible, and it's as many parts. I wanted to have as many parts as possible because the world is really complicated, and so I wanted it to be as complicated as possible. So that's, of course, makes it really difficult. So the most complicated parts of the whole project are these little spheres, these 1-inch spheres that you'll see distributed throughout all 5 of the elements. And those support these little 3/16-inch long rods that hold the glass parts. Those, well, I'm just gonna say it. Those little spheres cost $1,000 each to make. And basically—
No one's allowed in the galleries anymore.
And really they should cost about like $50,000 to make. They were made basically in South Los Angeles at a place that had $2 million, what are called 5-axis lathes that are running 24 hours a day in a workshop that was a complete mess. Oil all over the floor, basically like a total wreck, run by a real jerk, and basically, and all run by wonderful people, but not a single person who spoke English. And they were all extremely smart people, but communication was difficult because basically they were, I think many of them may have had engineering degrees, but they did not speak any English. So I didn't speak any Spanish. So it was complicated, and they were working 24 hours a day, and these machines cost $2 million each. And basically, they don't own any of them. They rent them. And basically, essentially, long story short, this is like a sweatshop. It's a sweatshop made out of $2 million machines run by people with engineering degrees, basically at night. And basically, so it's a craziest thing. And this company makes parts for NASA on contract. And the only reason why they're willing to make these parts is because basically the NASA contract said run out. And so basically they're, okay, well, we'll do this stuff at night for you. And basically, so that was the only reason why I could even get the price down to $1,000. And so essentially, then they called and they said, the math is impossible. The machines are going to break. So basically, you can't do it. We can't do it. The math is too difficult because the spherical math was too difficult. And so I flew out to LA. I don't know anything about math. And basically, and I went to the control room with all these Spanish-speaking engineers. And basically, I realized that they had made a mistake. They basically had made a mistake in which they had assumed that the angle of incidence, or essentially the angle of which that they were referencing, was the surface of the sphere. But they had to actually point the drill bit, and the radio-controlled machine that was bouncing radio waves off of the surface of the sphere, and maybe this story's getting too long. But basically, you can't make a perfect sphere on the Earth because for various reasons. So the sphere was too imperfect for the accuracy of the machine. So basically, the machine was refusing to meet the surface of the sphere. So you had to trick the machine and say, go towards the theoretical center of the sphere. And I just said, I pointed, and with body language, I was like, and then they just clicked a button and boom, and the whole thing worked.
Magic. Did they make all the parts? Or were all the parts assembled, produced in different places, and then it got put together?
No, they didn't. It was very funny. The spheres were made in Queens. Then those little spheres are first made in Queens by a company that makes lamp parts, and they were the only people who was able to make them in the whole country. Then they were shipped to LA. Then they made those holes in it. Then they were shipped to another chrome plating company, and then those parts had nothing to do with any of the other parts. So all the other parts were made by all kinds of other people. I mean, that's when I say there was like 100 people involved. There were many different people involved. The glass parts were all made by me and the people who work with me in my own studio. And it was such a crazy process that the people who work with me secretly made a long satirical film about it as a Christmas present, in which they talked about the mystery of the spheres and the discs, and how they were being forced to make these mysterious objects.
How come we're not showing that film too?
Well, we should have. Sorry for the long story.
Oh, no. I mean, the creation of the objects is as wondrous as the objects themselves. I want to go back to Durer. I always want to go back to Durer, but let's go back to Durer. So when Durer made his representation of the celestial sphere in 1515, he didn't know that Copernicus was at work that Copernicus in 1543 would publish a treatise that would totally undermine that representation and prove that the universe, our universe, was heliocentric. And in that change our whole view of ourselves in the universe. So in Durer's illustration, the Earth is at the center, Copernicus theorizes the sun at the center, and where we are then changes significantly. What do you think the role of artists and scientists is in terms of telling us our place in the universe, or alluding to it, or is that just too big a question?
I mean, I think that one of the great things about being an artist is that it's okay to make a fool out of yourself, and you know that artistic ideas are often best when they aren't the knife edge of being so big that they could become absurd. And that's the risk you take being an artist. I think you want to try to deal with, you know, artists are often accused of being pretentious. And while I hope I'm not a pretentious person, or not too often anyway, that
You're not.
but I think that the reason why is because basically the art should play in, like science, like philosophy, like literature, in urgent issues, like politics, in questions of urgent issues, and artists should try to risk whatever, as much as they possibly can, and I think that when going back to what we started the conversation about, like what do artists and scientists have in common, I think that the potential is for, to my mind, one of the greatest potentials of art and science, both, is not this, in either case, is not the pure art for art's sake, nor science for science sake. It's the potential for the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of meaning, to actually have an influence on the human sphere. And basically, it's not that you set out to influence the human sphere. It's not that we're setting out to make propaganda, but basically that through the search for understanding, that basically we might stumble upon, we might find information about the world through observation, through theorizing, through experiment, through making, through experiment with, let's say, like to me, the exhibition itself is always an experiment. And it's an experiment both in terms of the physical manifestation, but it's an experiment with all of you. Like, it's an incredible privilege that all of you would come and look at it. And I don't know what the result of that experiment is. The result of that experiment is determined by all of you and what you think. And hopefully, basically, collectively, the result of these kinds of experiments could potentially be changing how we see our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of our place in the world, our understanding of how the world works, and most significantly, how we treat each other and how we relate to each other. And basically, the best way, I think, to change how we relate to each other is to understand our interrelationships differently. So basically, to understand who you are in relation to me differently. And so, for example, if basically if the world is hierarchical, basically that makes me want to treat everybody in a hierarchical way. If the world is not hierarchical, maybe that helps me to see that we should urgently fight to, or fight maybe is the wrong word. We should urgently work towards a world of less hierarchy. And so that's what's so exciting about the ideas of the Big Bang and about the multiverse, is their incredible implications philosophically, and their challenge literally to the ideas around diversity, around multiplicity, about possibility. And I think that they are profound in that way, and that basically we can we can actually encounter these ideas in small ways and in large ways. Like, you don't have to understand everything about these theories to have them influence you. So, for example, one of my favorite aspects of life is that ideas move through the human community in the strangest of ways. So this whole project, the only reason I know anything about cosmology is because I went to the opera. And I went to the opera, and I'd never been to the opera, so standing room only seats, and I only went to the opera because my friend bought 10 seats, standing room only, and invited 10 friends. And basically, that led me to this, and that's why I'm here. And so you never know where ideas go. And so basically, and so one little piece of an idea can be the germ of something that can spread amongst us, and that can change how we can see each other.
And you know, it's the great benefit. Yes. It's the great benefit of having the installation here in the museum, in an academic environment, in the public space of the museum, so that we can bring people together in the gallery to use your work to have those kinds of conversations among people from different disciplines and backgrounds. And so we are grateful for the opportunity that your work affords us over the next 6 months in having it here at the museum. So thank you. And is there something more you would
Okay, well, I just say, yes, I just say thank you all for being here, but also I just to reinforce what you said, it's very special for me to have the exhibition here, both because of the work of Andre Linde and Thomas Reichman, who has been involved with the project from the beginning, but also because I hope to learn from all of you, and specifically from the university community, over the engagement with the piece here. And I think that it's a really one of the most exciting times that the piece has ever been shown, because it really has this intrinsic connection to this institution, and it is. Art and education, this question of how they interrelate is, I think, an essential one, and not something that we know yet enough about. So, I'm grateful myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Josiah. It's been a pleasure having you here. And before I let you get up and have more to eat and drink, I just want to tell you about some events coming up around the exhibition. So tomorrow, Josiah and David Weinberg, the astronomer that he worked with, will be speaking together at 2 p.m. in Oshman Hall. It will be an opportunity for Josiah to have an in-depth conversation with David around the science. So there is that opportunity. And then over the next few months, we will be holding a series of talks in the gallery called Case Studies, in which we pair an art historian with someone from another discipline, a physicist, a philosopher. And it is an opportunity for visitors to be involved in those conversations that are possible here at the Art Museum. 2 more things coming up. As I told you, we have the opening of the Kerry Tribe film this evening. On Thursday night of next week at the Anderson Collection, they too will open a Kerry Tribe film, and there'll be a panel discussion and a reception on Thursday night. And on Thursday, April 4th, Shannon Ebner will be here giving a lecture about her exhibition here in the Cantor Auditorium. So I just want to end by saying thank you, all of you, for being here this evening, and thank you especially, Josiah, for sharing your great wisdom and artistic vision with us here at Stanford. So thank you.